Excuse me. Excuse me. So we back again, y'all. We here, Gilded Sages. I am the Black Anglo-Saxon. I am here with my housemates, InquisitiveQ. Quan the Poet will be joining us later. And today we will be talking about sports in the Black community. We're also expecting a guest, Perry Harris, who is a sports enthusiast, a personal trainer as well. So when he comes over, we will actually get into that conversation as well. And then also, while we're doing the basic homework, we can like the video, share the video, and leave any comments while we're talking. Again, we want this to be a complete engagement in terms of how we're having our discussions, as your voices matters as much as ours. So with that being said, I wanted to get into the conversation right away and just talk about how we as a community, I think sports is something that we helm, something that we champion as a group, and it's something that also we prioritize in our relationships in terms of what it is we talk about and what it is we are having a conversation about. Um, there's some things that has transpired over the course of especially the months of COVID, with some comments being made. And we'll also be talking about some of the older content where we're talking about Jay-Z and his partnership with the NFL, as well as Jordan Brand. So I'll start off the conversation with Jay-Z's partnership with the NFL and bringing that to Colin Kaepernick, because we also have a piece from the Hill that we're going to touch on, where the Navy SEALs had dogs attack or in training attack a man wearing a Colin Kaepernick jersey. And so before we actually get started, I want to bring up the article that we'll be referencing in terms of the Jay-Z NFL conversation. And then after that, I'll just go ahead and get your opinions on what it is you necessarily think of it. So, and here we go, and away we go. Hold up, Jay-Z's new NFL partner. Here we go, and then we're gonna share that. Yes. So nope, that's wrong Jordan. Article.
Jordan is a little later.
Jordan is a little later. So here we have Navy SEALs, and then we have Vox right here. Boom, boom. And again, this is from Vox. This is the controversy surrounding Jay-Z's partnership with the NFL explained. I'll just go over the notes and the quote that stood out to me the most. And it talks about how the NFL, it says, and the fact that several NFL owners are prominent donors and supporters of Donald Trump, who has repeatedly attacked Kaepernick and other kneeling NFL players, framing their protests against injustice as unpatriotic, has led to arguments that the league cares more about pleasing the president and his supporters than the predominantly Black group of players who sought to highlight injustice. All of these issues predate the new NFL Rock Nation partnership, which was perhaps not coincidentally discussed in detail at a press conference held on the third anniversary of Colin Kaepernick's protest. And these issues still have backlash against the criticism. So I'll stop there and then allow you to speak on to how this affects us as a community. Should we invest in sports? And you can just go ahead from there and take it.
I gotta break that down, because investing in sports, and you gotta understand that the NFL and the NBA all these other organizations are sports entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not just sports. So that being said, Rock Nation and Jay-Z making his deal with Rock under the Rock Nation umbrella means that he's extending Rock Nation services to sports. And one of the things that Jay-Z constantly purports to be a leader on is not necessarily changing Marcy Projects itself, but changing the mindset of Marcy Projects through the advent of business. So what I mean by that is to say is that this move shows a level of business sophistication that most people are not comfortable with because it goes like then it's adverse against the group. I'm just saying what I observed. And then even observing that doesn't get to the whole of it. It's like he's in entertainment, he understands entertainment, but we got to get down to where he's going with the sports agents. Because agents, what a lot of people don't understand, because we don't talk about contracts with sports as well, is that as a sport agent, let's say from a less affluent community, or I'm a black person, it's in the interest of Rock Nation to enter that space to when he says we're beyond kneeling now, to say instead of protesting, we're going to be active change agents within the business practice in which Ballers with Dwayne The Rock Johnson really is, it typifies what he's doing. But that's only if the players are still astute enough to be student athletes, not just students. Like we're going to get into Jordan later on and The Last Dance and how he put pressure on the Bulls to be great, how we got to put that pressure on and get it down to the community. You got to put the pressure in to understand plays. So that means you learning. You can learn. That also means that we got to put pressure on you inside of the classroom. And it's like, it's not necessarily pressure in the sense of if you don't achieve, you're a failure. It's pressure in the sense of let us know what you need so we can make you great. The same way a coach goes, we got to bring down that wall. It's like you're comfortable with playing sports because you can physically move, but you're not comfortable articulating your thoughts because I don't know what it is. Maybe you don't have someone in your social network that has a vocabulary or a lexicon that help you understand things. But if you're in a classroom, that's what the teacher is for. And if you got a good teacher, they're going to be able to spot it and like, okay, you're not stupid. You can understand. But the way you know how to articulate things is not as great as you can in sports. We need your sports acumen to be, we need you to show your intelligence on all levels.
But I think that goes back to, again, for me, how much we feed into it without the, like you said, full, clarify what?
It. What do you mean? You talking about it by sports?
Yes.
Okay, feed into sports.
Feed into sports from that angle and with the absence of the full spectrum that you were speaking of, you end up, again, perpetuating the very thing that you're talking about. As I read in the article, and the reason that I picked out that part was because what happens is, like you said, you talk about contracts, and I don't think we talk enough about the politics of sports as well either, and how, like you said, there are all these different layers to sports, whether it be sports medicine, whether it be,
I'm glad you mentioned that. We'll come back to that.
Like whether it be understanding all of these different dynamics that interact with it. But I think the issue that I have is that we usually tend to just binge on the numbers or the more trivial parts because I say that because I'll see people get upset at Donald Trump and like everybody hates Donald Trump or hates the GOP or hates kind of how the politics of everything is right now. But at the same time, because they're not anchored in that, or they don't necessarily, what I feel, see the value in how those things interconnect and intersect. I think what happens, how politics and how the very team that you are giving your attention to, or the very team that you're feeding, or the culture that you're feeding, then takes the access and, like you said, the social capital contracts and all of those things and weaponize it against you. And I think that in a lot of cases, we have to pull back on not necessarily consuming sports, but consuming it in the way that we're consuming it to be able to make all of those different pivots.
Okay, so just to add in, I want to make sure that we do recognize though that some of the earliest politicals, like sort of statements that we made in society, were started from sports.
Coming to the frame.
Yeah, it was started from sports. So like you look at Joe Louis and how black people back in that day consumed Joe Louis knocking out the white boxer. I forget his name.
You talking about the 1910s?
Exactly. That was a political moment for a lot of America. Also, Jackie Robinson and him passing Babe Ruth. That was very political. And then you had the German.
I know what you're talking about. 1936 Jesse Owens, I believe.
Some of those were political moments that came through sports that predate a lot of what we learned through black politics, which is civil rights and everything after that.
Okay.
So you can't really lose that fact too, because that's also an aspect of why we do consume some of what we do with sports. It's a tradition that goes.
I see you got a rebut and you laughing.
Yeah,
but you got to say
because it's like, son, this shirt reminds me him that shirt color, and you know it's all pop. Remember, I remember. You sound like a remember berry, bro. It's like that's nostalgia because you got the 1910s. The 1910s at this time, it's still you have redliners, so you have the social capital within the neighborhoods to have that conversation and have those conversations because those affluent black people are barred from leaving. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about the 1918s and 1910s, the Great White Hope, Jack Johnson speeding through, getting a ticket, telling the cop he can hold on to it, the uppity Negro. And that gets back into, and I'm going to dovetail it to Jay-Z, it gets back down to even what Candace Owens is talking about, black entrepreneurship, although I'll go from Candace Owens to Killer Mike. As soon as we got off the boat, we was like, okay, we got to figure some shit out. So that's one argument. But when we keep making the argument about let's be nostalgic, let's also introduce Dorothy West and call them the Gentile poor. Let's also introduce Langston Hughes, who talks about the Negro in the racial mountain. What I mean is that there is always this talented like air is that I am superior. And when you have those people in the 1980s contribute to black flight, and then you're telling the inner city populace the only way for them to matriculate through to a decent life, in which Showtime did a show called Survivor's Remorse about this, is that you're telling a black population or a population of people that they're hellouts. Basically, they're held to the Spartan standards. So that argument about going through black sports is why you have Malcolm X in the 1960s say that they're not politicians. We have to, I'm gonna give it to you, but we have to understand when we come down and talk about community and sports, is that you cannot dedicate yourself to sports into politics. You are not trained in that way. And what I mean by that is that Muhammad Ali was a great spokesperson for politics. But when we get down to politicians, we need people who are dedicated to decision making. We need people who are open-minded enough and receptive enough to understand it's like, okay, I have a student, or let's say community member. I have a community member who the only way that they digest medicine is through ESPN. That injury list that people get, that is a medical report. But what happens is that on my socialization journey, is that what happens is that sophisticated populations or populations that know that you don't have to be in front of the camera to make money. You don't have to be the person dribbling the ball to be in sports. They understand sports medicine. They're going to sports medicine so they can keep their interest while learning a skill that transfers to multiple industries. And that's what I'm getting to is that when you don't have that professional class within your community, and then you have, which can be predatory by Rock Nation, because let's understand, affluence is affluence. And to remain affluent, you have to exploit a person's ignorance. Mm-hmm. You have to exploit the ignorance. Mm-hmm. And that's where the capitalism for me becomes predatory, because you don't have people who are sophisticated consumers of the contracts that they sign. And that's the problem I have with when I go on these diatribes, people call it bougie. It's like, no, I'm trying to admonish you. I'm trying to let you know that there's someone on the other side of that door that's going like, hey, I got you, little nigga. I got you, little nigga. Come here, little spook. Come here, little spook. I know you want a job. I know you want some money. Here's some cash. I'll keep this little nigga running. He never going to catch up. Keep that nigga running. But the slaves understood that. I don't know what the fuck happened when we walked on the plantation.
And that's a great segue. What I'm gonna do is for the audience, I'm gonna bring up the article to kind of get a glimpse of the deal. It's from the NFL, and this is straight again from the NFL in terms of the Jay-Z's Rock Nation's partnership. And it just goes, Rock Nation, an entertainment company founded by rapper and businessman Sean Carter, is entering into a multi-year partnership with the NFL to enhance the NFL's live game experiences and to amplify the league's social justice efforts. As part of the agreement, Rock Nation will advise on the selection of artists for major NFL performances, such as the Super Bowl. A major component of the partnership will be to nurture and strengthen community through football and music, including the NFL's Inspire to Change initiative. The NFL formally launched Inspire to Change in 2019, after more than 2 years of work with NFL players with the goal of creating positive change in communities across the country. That's the gist of the goal, and I wanted to read that, and I wanted to put that in frame before I went on to speak to your point about not being able to be disciplined and the leader in both arenas and spaces, because what happens is this initiative is more about, again, individual access and individual, for me, matriculation, as you're just selecting people, and it's similar to what we have in LeBron James School in terms of creating a pipeline. And I'm not against a pipeline. I think pipelines are necessary, but I think when that pipeline,
yeah, which I'm going to return to.
And I think, but what happens is when that pipeline isn't done in a way where it is building the community or the collective of us as African Americans, because yeah, it's a pipeline, but that pipeline through most of those channels would go back to, again, the NFL, the same NFL or the same institutions that, for me, people tend to complain about, whether it's the music industry, whether it's I heard people, the WAP song just came out, and now people are going and debating about that. Mm-hmm. And that, I just want to use that as an example to say,
I'm just being a heathen.
If we are going to, as a community, decide that we have a problem with a certain narrative or a problem with a certain idea or a certain framework in how we're being interacted with as a community, we also can't then get excited and hype about going to watch NBA games in a bubble or NFL games where they walking through spritzers of disinfectant so that they can be able to practice while we're also in a pandemic. But you can go ahead and speak to that. I just wanted to.
I would like to hear him speak on the pipeline, because I'm gonna come back to it. But the pipeline, what is your perspective on what he means by the pipeline? So that's what I hear from you about the legacy.
So for me, I just want to always like ground things and like finding that commonality. So for me, whenever we talk sports and whenever we talk like entertainment in general, I always tend to lean towards, a conversation starter. So when you're talking to different people, right, from different backgrounds, and you have no frame of reference, some of the easiest conversations that you can build community through or engage through are sometimes the low-hanging fruit things. And again,
low-hanging fruit as in sports.
Entertainment, sports, all of those types of things.
Okay.
It gives
you see that as an issue?
It can be, but it's also an opportunity. It can be both depending on how.
Let me ask you this, and I want to hear your answer. If that is the case, how do you continue to use that as a tool to engage, but also make the argument or put yourself in a position where you're building up the collective for that not to be the entry-level conversation? As if you continue to do that without raising the bar, we then become perpetuators of the same thing. And I would just like to hear your opinion on how do you use that frame and then insert it to expand that conversation.
And again, I agree. So, all right, for example, for me, when I was beginning my college career in business, my frame of reference was video gaming and wrestling. Those were the only two things that I understood and knew to a T. And because those two were my frame of references, whenever I was encountering business material, I was always able to reflect back on those two things: entertainment through video gaming, through wrestling. So I feel like when we talk community building, we have to somewhat connect dots and find parallels between what it is that you consume on a day-to-day and how those things parallel some of the things that you might be going through politically, socially, when you're trying to move into more diverse communities and diverse forms of education. Because again,
let me take off from there.
Okay.
Let me take off from there.
Go ahead.
Because I want to go to both, right? My thing is, and this is why I say sports, because sports is the large umbrella. My problem is that it's a hyper focus on being seen in American sports. And that's where, for me, the Black American community fall off. It's like fencing is also a sport. It has another history. You can get scholarships. Water polo, swimming is like focusing on one sport as this is what we want to champion, and then you don't champion anything else. Gymnastics, skiing, all of these things are sports. And to your point, sports can be a tool for positive integration, a technique of getting people to come together and community build. However, it has to be a level of, when you're doing positive integration, there needs to be an intangible. It has to be an intangible there that keeps people coming back. Not because, I feel good today because I did a good deed. It's like, I can't give it because I know I can relax. And that's what sports can be. You can get up your frustrations. You can have an adversary on the field, but that be your best friend off the field because you both know what it's like to hate each other so much that you work on the off hours just to humiliate each other in the game. It feels so good. It feels good to humiliate someone that you don't like in a setting that is, everyone likes to compete.
And I think that's a conversation.
Everyone likes to compete.
Different conversation about our culture as Americans.
Yes, and what I'm telling me is that everyone likes to compete, but everyone also likes to fight for an underdog. And that's when you get the entertainment part come in. And that's when the representation matters. I am tired of the dignified Negro movie. Oh, we're going to talk about Fred Hampton now. I was like, can we stop the performative, please?
Yes.
Give me the real. Give me the 1950 No Exit when Sidney Poitier is a doctor, but he's still being called a nigger by someone who's a prisoner. Give me the real. Show me Birth of the Nation. Show me Woodrow Wilson. Show me that black exploitation with Claudine and the whole thing about the welfare queen. Show me how policy was really played out. And this is where I get upset with the Black American community because it's like, where the hell did we fall off with removing history from craft? And that's, to me, I'm about to punt it off to you, but that's, to me, to your point about the legacy, it's like those people in the 20s and the 10s and everything else that wanted to leave left. And so when you come into the 80s and you come to the 90s where we basically were all crack babies until you was proven not to be a crack baby, especially if you came from Ward 8, is until you really begin to get into the psyche of people to understand that their imagination is what limits them, because they're not receptive to new information, it keeps people from understanding we all don't have to be politicians to make the politician that we want to support powerful.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm leaving with you.
No, I think that speaks to it, and I think that also speaks to, like you said, the culture of America as a whole. Because what I don't want to do, and what I will say as a disclaimer, if people have gotten to the video or through the video this long, is that it's not really about shunning Black Americans, African Americans for watching sports. My biggest, all of these conversations that we have are usually around how we're approaching something or how we're going about engaging a particular, whether it be institution, construct, idea, or and so on. And you mentioned something about, again, you don't have to be, you said you don't have to be a politician to get your favorite politicians elevated. Mm-hmm. And I think that's also something in sports. And going back to that conversation, again, for me, it's just always about what we're divvying up our attention to. Mm-hmm. Again, not shunning people for watching sports, but I need for people to meet. If you want leaders in this time, we are in the middle of COVID right now. We're in the middle of a crisis.
And that's what you wanted me to speak on. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm going to speak on that. And the fact that we're in the middle of COVID, the fact that we're in the middle of a crisis and sports is still important goes back to the Roman poet Jovial. It's like one thing that has to be understood about society, people need entertainment. People need entertainment. So that's where sports figures are important. Sports figures are important because they keep the people entertained. That's why actors are important and everything else. That's why people are willing to receive ideas. That's why they're important. People need to be entertained. Boredom is horrible, but that and coming at the cost of lives and coming at the cost of focusing on policy, to your point, it goes back to the Roman poet. Give them bread and games. Yeah. Most people rather focus on what entertains them than what saddens them.
Yeah, and that's where largely my critique comes from on this topic, as I'm not even going to use too much of my time to speak to it in that way, because I think you hit it on the head in terms of entertainers and sports being used to coddle, which is, again, why I'm having the issue with it, because I know that's what it's used for. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't indulge in small leisures, as we all have hobbies. And
I'm not trying to negate that.
No, I got you. And anything can become that.
I'm saying for the audience as well.
I want to speak to, I'll use the time, though, to read another article from inequality.org that speaks to exactly what you were talking about, because I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of where I have my issue with this whole situation, and the fact that we're still, after having seen how being overzealous with certain things and certain types of entertainment and how it leaves us in the dust when we talk about trying to get out of tough situations or get or transition into quote unquote more autonomy for our group. And what is about to pop up on the screen is, no, that's not it. Nope. There's so many. Yeah, man.
Like a jelly.
I got to, man. And so, because you can't leave it. But this is an article from inequality.org. It is Black Wealth in America Hardly Exists by Antonio Moore. Shout out to him and everything he is doing over there with ADOS, as he wrote about this topic in terms of the wealth level that we have, in terms of, and how kind of sports and entertainment is, like you said, used to create this facade, as well as have us feed into it on a trivial stance. But it says a recent study for the Institute of Policy Studies and the Corporation for Economic Development notes that it would take 228 years for the average Black family to amass the same level of wealth the average white family holds today. This gap will never close if America stays on its current economic path. According to the Institute on Assets and Social Policy, for each dollar increase in average income that African-American households saw between 1984 and 2009, just 69 cents in additional wealth was generated, compared with the same dollar increase to income and creating an additional $5.19 for similarly situated white households. And this conversation isn't about the white households per se, but I want to get into, again, for a generation, African Americans have been confusing celebrity exceptionalism with economic progress. Quotes from wealthy African American celebrities overcoming the odds fill vision boards on bedroom walls and see more important than real economic struggles. And because I don't want to, and because this isn't a white and black conversation, I'm not going to go into the wealth data as he did, which I think all of you should check out. But I wanted to speak to the fact that right now we are in a predicament where we're about to face mass evictions. The unemployment, unfortunately, is about to take a dip as I believe that they're about to go on recess, and I haven't seen any news with them coming to a deal with the next stimulus package. We have had entertainers come out and say that just in general, there've been a few, Gabrielle Union, Zoe Salonda, just talking about how they don't necessarily have the level of wealth, quote unquote, that we would believe that makes us comfortable to consume it in such a way where we're just talking about, oh yeah, it's the new hottest track, or oh yeah, this person got this many stats, that many stats, this many stats. What's the next move in terms of the new cycle of celebrity in sports? My thing is, we can't continue to be that way because it is problematic, because what it doesn't allow us to do, and I agree with you 100% that it does that. Go ahead.
When this is over, I'm gonna show you the Latin phrase that's gonna be a shirt for you. Buyer beware. It's like, but to a large degree, you don't understand how you're speaking to Montesquieu's critique of building yourself in a Roman society. But we're in a representative
and football is a gladiator sport.
It is a gladiator sport. But again, you know what I mean? I'm the cuckoo one that likes to read philosophy and shit. That's dope.
But again, I wouldn't even say it's cuckoo. I think the problem that we have when we talk about, again, what we value is that you come off in that way because, again, people don't necessarily put value into their political leaders or put value into, quote unquote, our professional class. Everything right now is who's the next influencer or who is going to be the next individual superstar. And being fully transparent, that's why I wanted you all to help me make this a lateral attempt, at business, because what happens is it gets bogged down with so many individual components and competitors that we don't necessarily have a marketplace that has the mechanics necessary to get us across the finish line.
Yeah, but what you're doing here is, and here's the bridge, and I feel like I'm the bridge because my socialization is. That's when you're getting back to the Quan's point about the Fannie Lou Hamers and the Ida B. Wells and people who, they're very educated. Those are very educated people. Education takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of dedication. It literally transforms the way you think. But if you read, you also need to move. That's why I'm fat, because I didn't move. I just read. But that aside, I ain't worried about it, man.
Hey, we're going to get you there. I told you that the fitness is...
I don't want to.
I don't either.
I'm Garfield.
But
I'm sorry, I'm long. But help me, because I got lost.
You were talking about...
Yeah, I got you the affluence. It's being receptive. You have to be receptive to what you don't know. And that's when it goes back to the community thing. Is that when you have to value that person that has the acumen. Not everybody needs to be a legal scholar, but you need a scholar at the table, no matter the gender, no matter how they express themselves. You got to get away from, and this is where a lot of...
You need to respect.
Yeah, respect. And this is what a lot of black people do. It's like, I'm cooler than you. I got the freshest thing going. It's a negative integration. It's like, I'm cooler than you. I got the freshest thing going. It's like, but my sunglasses cost more than your shoes. So I know you don't know what you're looking at.
So what I'm gonna do, because we're not there yet. I want to hear y'all comments, and everybody who's watching in the comments, please feel free to comment on this. But I want to hear both of you all's opinion on the things that has transpired. And it's a question on whose side do you take, or what stance do you take in terms of the LeBron versus Kyrie Irving situation, when Kyrie came to the forefront and said that he doesn't believe that the league should go on and have the season due to all of the things that were going on, not only the economic crisis, but the political crisis as well as the pandemic. And LeBron came out and basically went against that, saying that, you know, he understands where Kyrie is coming from. It's all love, but at the same time, he approached it from a everybody has to eat in this environment, and we need other people to make their money. So what I'm gonna do is I want you to kind of speak to whose side you take a little bit, and then you to go to it, and then what we can do is comment on that in the chat, and then I'll bring in a few comments so that we can have a discussion in terms of who do you think got it right on how to approach this environment as the African American community, because that's in context of the NBA and the NFL being predominantly black organizations. So you go ahead.
So as much as I love Kyrie and his stance, because as of right now, we really don't deserve sports as in terms of how we are treating, you know, Black Americans in this country. As much as you say, you know, I get on people about not dying, I don't feel like people should die over Kyrie's ideology because it's devoid of a plan. And for me, if Kyrie was gonna also say, okay, we're gonna take the top 5 NBA earners and we're gonna fund the lower tier players so that they can make it through this, you know, not having a season, or if there was more steps involved in his theory on how, okay, we're going to give this up, but once this money is gone, how everyone else is going to eat, the vendors, the people who serve popcorn, you know, there's a lot of other small pieces that I feel like gets left out if we just all out, just follow Kyrie all the way down. Because it's easy for him having the money to be like, I can take this, but I'm not sure if one of his teammates on the practice team could really afford to do so.
So I'll hear your opinion or your take on it.
You already know me. Neither one of them has the right because they're players. And I'm going to stress that. It's like we can't confuse the NBA and the NFL with players. They're players. They're not, most of them, and this is going back to Rock Nation, they're not the sports agent. They don't do the sports medicine, the sports doctors. So tied to each player is maybe 5 to 6 different professions that provide services. So when we take on these players, that's when you have to get to a point where you have someone that comes in and goes like, yo, Kyrie and LeBron. That's not a discussion you have on the open. That's the discussion we need to have behind closed doors to have a unified front. It's okay to have your SCLCs and to have your SNCCs. We've never, going back to Randall Kennedy, we never had a single approach. There will never be a right approach. There will always be approaches, some that fail and some that don't fail. But if you don't have a populace that don't have the acumen to focus, you have to literally go where they are. And where people are right now is that they literally need to be entertained. They need to be entertained. People literally need to be entertained. They have to be entertained. They have to.
I can see
the psychological load right now from the pandemic doesn't allow for people to forego certain luxuries. And it goes back to what most people don't understand. Your superheroes, to your point, who do you make your superhero? It depends on why I'm saying this is because most superhero comics come out of wartime because people project themselves out to something else. Mm-hmm. So this is where me coming in as radical, like talking about the narrative. People make superheroes. They project themselves out. And right now, because the values aren't, to your point, or the priorities aren't to a level to which, okay, we sit at a dinner table, there's an hour dinner, we want to spend a good 30, 45 minutes talking about school, education, professional, things you want to do. Then we'll entertain some sports. As a parent, I'm not going to talk to you about sports. As a parent, I'm going to talk to you about your education and where you're going. Versus what we have now is that we have parents who think that they can be parents and coaches. Like, those are the different things.
And what I'll do is, if you got a comment on that specific topic, you can read that off to me. You could choose, and so I can juxtapose my comment because I have a stats on it to speak to.
It's not specific to this particular conversation, but Zimba G said, "I understand how sports is a major distraction from major issues, but if sports stop, don't you feel like people will always have a different distraction?" And that's somewhat of what I somewhat get into. Because, again, you have people out here that, in all honesty, they could be doing a whole lot of worse things than just watching sports. You know what I mean?
And this is where we will always disagree. Is because you have to begin to have a level of accountability in terms of, yes, there will be another distraction. But the game is to make the distractions better, more healthy. And I'll use an analogy and frame it around health in terms of me losing 150 pounds, right? There's always going to be that there's always going to be that quote unquote cheap item that you have for leisure. What I did though was tell myself, you know what? Instead of that cheap item being something that is going to deplete my system in a negative way, how about we do damage control? It's the same thing that we do with everything else. Right now, everybody's telling me that we should vote for Joe Biden over Donald Trump as damage mitigation, which I agree with. But what happens is, and this is where the collective and what Quentin was talking about in terms of getting people there to have those values and not being considered an elitist, but saying, look, I don't necessarily mind us talking about it, but at the same time, the way that we're doing it is in a very unhealthy way. So what happens is, yes, there's going to be another distraction, but our job as sages, as people who have the level of acumen, you have to move that needle. And when you say, oh, well, if sports isn't a distraction, there's just going to be another one. Yes, there will. But let's move and herd people into a distraction, again, that will benefit us in some way. Because the distraction, like you said, the distraction could easily be C-SPAN.
Exactly. To your point. Archer. You know I like Archer. I don't know if you know I like Archer. Yeah. But if you don't get the references, you don't get the jokes. So to your point, it's like, yes, make it more sophisticated. And that's what I mean by sophisticated. Make it more nuanced. I'm tired of hearing music that makes my groin hurt. I'm tired of hearing, this is lit. I'm tired of hearing, I ain't gonna hold you. You haven't said shit. I'm tired of it. And then we know this is what y'all know. This is what a lot of people don't understand. When I'm in a room in which you're nothing but a number on a balance sheet, I have two choices to make. My career or the community. And if the community ain't no place to land, it has to be my career.
Yeah. And to your point about the sophistication,
it has to be.
What ends up happening is you don't necessarily have the level of sophistication. Because again, the conversation isn't really about whether sports being a distraction. We could, if we were having a conversation around sports around, okay, y'all are quote unquote hate Donald Trump to his guts, but you're willing to still support an institution that has openly praised him, that still openly supports him. So what I'm saying is, let's have it in a more streamlined framework in terms of, if we're going to hate something, then we have to discard of the other thing, because you can't say that it's an existential crisis that Donald Trump is going to win the election, but at the same time, when you're feeding the numbers and the bottom line of institutions that are donating to this man, who makes it that much easier to win, as we all know, campaigning in elections are heavily built on money as well.
But that is, I feel like that's a slippery slope.
It's not a slippery slope because you are financing your own destruction. And that's why I'm going to cut it there, because it's just like,
I would love to hear the argument.
Let's pivot. I want to pivot to the NBA.
You can.
But we're going to hear it for the sake of the discussion.
I do.
Because it's like, bro, we can't keep saving people.
I mean,
it's
I
like
hear you,
placate.
but I'm just saying it's a slippery slope because everybody has vices.
That's the problem.
Everybody has vices.
That's enabling.
And if you go down that rabbit hole, it's like, dude, if you into fashion, that's problematic. If you into food, that's an issue. If you into if you go down that rabbit hole, you can find issue with it.
You're not. I'm motherfucking the Cheshire Cat and you Alice, bitch. This is my wonderland. Okay. How do you become a shopper and a retailer? You become a sophisticated customer. Everybody is a customer. Understand about capitalism. Everybody is a customer. That's why they want your information from Facebook. You are the product. Everybody is a customer. America is about hustle. That's what white people understand. They don't give a fuck that my skin is pale. They give a fuck that I'm willing to work for $1 and pay some taxes. I gotta give Uncle Sam his cut. I am tired of hearing about vices. I am tired of hearing that conversation without virtues inserted, without moderation inserted. Because we have conversations, because this is what this does. I was engaging with this young lady who comes from an affluent background who wants to help Ward 7 and Ward 8. However, because she has been shut out from those conversations because of her background, because she speaks certain ways, and then we enable, because going back to a point with the teachers that pass over. I remember being that student that was like, I'm tired of having this expectation of me to appeal and to take on this level of tokenism to prove that urban Black boys can achieve because everybody else want to laugh and joke and cut up in class. No, I'm not taking that argument no more. If you can walk and chew bubble gum, if you can do everything else, you can take an hour out your day and protest. Because you can't bring up Fannie Lou Hamer, we can't bring up Ida B. Wells, we can't bring up Marcus Garvey, we can't bring up none of them if you're not willing to sacrifice. Every single last generation has to sacrifice. And if you're not willing to make a sacrifice, then your protest is not a protest, it's a loud ass party, and I want you to get to work, and I'm tired of paying the police overtime because you want to yell in the street instead of do your civic duty and show up at meetings.
And you know what? That leads us to our next conversation.
Thank you. That's why I was like,
article. No, because it all fits. You know, I love politics and I love it. Not politics. I love social theory and society because it all reinforces each other. But let's have and go to this article. I don't think I can play the video, but we gotta look at this.
Which one?
This is the conversation about the Navy SEALs and what happened. Because I want to speak to your point around allowing vices to just let them cripple you. I had a conversation with my girlfriend. Stop being lazy. You have to get past your vices. We all have them. But the winner is the person who knows how to overcome their vices. Now, I got you. It's all good. I appreciate it. But the U.S. Navy SEALs, this article ends ties with the museum over dogs attacking a man in a Kaepernick jersey. They reportedly cut ties with the independent Navy participating in a demonstration in which they attacked the man in a Colin Kaepernick jersey. I'm gonna see if I can just play the actual video for y'all because it's really kind of crazy to look at. If y'all can see that, just drop a yes in the chat and tell me.
Go, here comes Raven. Raven is the museum mascot. All right, Josh, he's going to probably get another dog. Here we go. Here comes Callie. Callie's the oldest dog in the field, 9 years old. Josh going to pick another one. Maybe, maybe not. Here we go. Here comes Storm, young buck on the field. All right. Here we go. Can Josh take more? Here comes Oplon. Smash them. I've seen Josh with 12 dogs at one time. All right. Here we go.
First off, let me start off by saying that's disgusting. One, to throw a Kaepernick jersey on it. And I'm not necessarily a fan of Kaepernick in the way that most people are because I feel like it's a lot of fake posturing in what he does. But let me say this into the point about the community at large and how we engage with sports and how entertainment and celebrity and vices continue to leave us in situations where someone can come out and do blackface. Someone can come out, not someone, an institution, because this is the Navy SEALs and this is a museum. How institutions can come out and do what it is they do and suffer no repercussions. I see posts about Breonna Taylor still not being brought to justice as her, as the people who shot her, again, are still walking free. And I bring that up because that's what I mean by, yes, there will be another distraction. But do you have to the question then becomes, do you have to give in to every distraction? The question becomes, do you have to give in to every vice? And I'll say this, even for fashion, being fully transparent, there's some things that I don't do. There's some things that I hate doing. For example, right? I know I can go on social media right now and post a picture with something that has to do with fashion, and that is how I have maintained my access because of, like you said, the shallowness of people and me understanding that and manipulating it to my advantage because that is how people choose to engage me. But what they don't do, and the problem with that is because the people who do actually value me, who pay me in most cases, are the ones who use the more in-depth, the more mental prowess that I have to people's detriment in some cases. And when I engage fashion, I also try to, and this is where, like you said, buyers beware. There's certain things that I don't divulge when it comes to fashion because, again, it defeats the whole purpose. But there are things that I understand about fashion and how that whole industry moves, which is why I got skinny, right? I didn't get skinny just because I cared about my health. I got skinny because I knew in fashion, I don't necessarily believe that fat people should be in fashion. And that's just an honest stance that I have. And that's not against fat people or fat shaming, as I'm here with 2 plus size men and have a plus size girlfriend at this point. The thing becomes, like you said, we're talking about acumen and what it takes to be in a particular space and what it takes to be the expert of that thing that you do. It takes sacrifices.
Okay.
I wanted to eat. I love to eat. He can vouch as well as my girlfriend that I am a glutton when it comes to food.
I mean,
No. I want to create the analogy because I want people to understand that yes, there will be vices. Yes, there will be distractions. And I can make another one in terms of how men approach and engage women. Are you going to chase behind every piece of ass you see? That's a distraction. Women are distractions. Are you going to do that?
I would say your attractions and your lust is a distraction. But to your point,
Go ahead.
Clarify something. What I hear when you talk about fashion is appearance in the Eurocentric form, because beauty standards change throughout the world and has changed throughout time. So I hear appearance, and it was someone who wants the virtuoso. It's like if you were a classical era, you'd be Brock, whereas I'll be romantic. I don't care about your goddamn super skinny shit. I like my thick and curvy. I'm just too muscular, because I don't want to feed into food. I don't want to feed into people having eating disorders because they want to appeal to something that their bodies naturally want to allow them. And that's to me with fashion and everything else. That's to me where I'll say this: any idea chased to its absolute is tyrannical. Love can easily become an obsession, and that's what I wanted to put out there.
I agree.
But you have a point.
Okay, so for me, and like I said, whenever I address certain things, it's always from a standpoint of like just the common person. So what I hear is that you developed a level of nuance about what it was that you enjoyed about fashion. And the thing is that we have to realize that a lot of people have to develop that level of nuance, but it starts initially through whatever it is that you're interested in. Because, for example, I was able to read a lot of different books when I was in 6th grade because I had the vocabulary to do so. But I didn't have a frame of reference, so I didn't know what the heck any of that stuff meant.
I get you.
All I'm saying is that even though these things tend to be problematic, they are also frame of reference things that people tend to use and infuse into what people usually want to be. You ask a lot of professionals, they'll tell you, my football experience is how I learned teamwork. My fashion experience.
So you're speaking of character development.
Yes, I can attest to those things as we all have to develop, right? So my question to you is, as I don't necessarily disagree with that, as we all come from a specific point, which is why, again, I want to reiterate that this conversation is not about really shunning sports. It's the way that we're engaging it and the way that it's being weaponized against us. Yeah. My question to you is then, as long as we've existed in America, as our group specifically, African Americans, and we're talking about building community, right? How long would you say we give people before? Because we're talking about, I'm pushing 30 this year.
I am 30.
Right?
I'm already there.
And so we're talking about men or people who should have developed enough to not just have a conversation about stats, to understand, even if they are that and enthusiasts, I'm not against that, but even in that, understand the timing and the frame that you're in to approach certain things in a way. Because again, my thing is, the problem is when you're also saying that you want to have other quote unquote leaders and content raised to the top, you have to, again, like we probably don't have many followers watching us, but at the same time, what people give their attention to rises. What I'm telling people is, if you want certain things in this moment, in this climate, you have to say, you know what? Sports are going to take a dip. For example, if I'm on a certain goal and I'm on a certain budget, I say, you know what? The shoes got to dip. The tree got to dip. All these things got to go, and not completely as a whole. Because even, I'll, again, fully transparent, while I was losing weight, my diet was way more strict to lose the weight versus what I do now in terms of managing the weight. Because, again,
the weight or the frame?
The frame and the weight, you could use those interchangeably, but just in terms of managing the aesthetic and managing the goal. And manage the goal, you have to give up certain things at certain times to be able to get there. And then once you get there, we can have a conversation about reevaluating what we want to give our attention to.
What I'm hearing is you want to have a conversation about over prioritizing sports. Yeah, it's not getting rid of sports, but how to over prioritize sports. I would like to give my time to the conversation.
Okay, so Zimba G, this is in response to the Kyrie LeBron. He says, about the NBA, tough question, but I understand Kyrie has some flaws in his approach, but at least he showed heart to take a stance. But anybody who takes that stance must know their job's on the line.
Yes, but to that point with the NBA, I'm glad you said that. Can we talk about the NBA that's wants to infuse $300 million within the Black communities? It was a press release. I don't know if you have it. For me, it was read like a press release. It's like, oh, this is what we're going to do, blah, 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 blah. It didn't really read as anything noteworthy. But here's my point. Because even fashion, my thing is literally people who decide how things go literally consume this day and night. LVMH, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, donated to HBCU.
That you want to point out, sir?
It's all about, it's just about the dollar amount.
Okay, yeah. It's $300 million.
It's $300. It's $300 million.
Yeah, the NBA Board of Governors is contributing $300 million in funding to establish. Give me 1 second.
I just want to make sure.
No, I got you. So they can see it. Absolutely. Because we're going to drop everything down in the description box after the video, so you all can go and then check out with Twitter as well, where you can find the article, so you can engage us around that. And also, if you watching right now, like the video, please help us out. That's a quick, easy way and free way to support us. Share the video and just had a conversation, bring people into the conversations. That is the best way to help us. And here we go. So the screen share, You have, this is from People magazine, NBA announces $300 million fund dedicated to empowering Black community through economic opportunities. The NBA Board of Governors is contributing $300 million in funding to establish a foundation focused on economic empowerment in the Black community. According to the NBA's press release, the foundation will be launched in partnership with the National Basketball Players Association. 30 NBA team owners will collectively contribute $30 million. Ooh, that's a bit of context there because that's nothing.
Exactly. Stop there. Because after that, we're gonna go into Jordan. I'm glad you brought up the NBA. Because when you say there's nothing, it's like that can be eaten in salaries.
Yeah.
That can be eaten in equipment. That can be eaten in leases. If you don't know how each dollar ain't a dollar, and you need to start counting cents for, okay, I got $1. When you have a house, it matters. Like I got a house with my mortgage. Let's just do ballpark numbers. Nothing realistic. My gross income is $3,500. My net income is $2,000. These are not even realistic numbers. Yeah. Let's just say I have no student loan debt. I have none of that. But my rent is $1,000. So out of my net, only thing I got is $1,000 left. That's not taking into account for utilities, groceries, transportation, entertainment, all of these things. And that gets into my point about the budget. $30 million over a decade, that's nothing.
32.
Well, but they give you the headline, NBA $300 million. And because people are over prioritizing the NBA, when you feed into vices and you don't let that person go, let me whisper something in your ear, something slick, right? You a hoe. They got you on the track. You running for them. I'm dead ass serious. You think I'm joking? What do you think Dave Chappelle was talking about when he was talking about Iceberg Slim? And why he walked away from $50 million? Why he walked away from $50 million? Why do you think that? White Americans are like, nah, you need to know them contracts. When I call lawyers shooters, I am not joking. Lawyers are shooters. When you live in a capitalistic society and you're not aware of what you're participating in, you make yourself a sucker.
And classification and the wealth classification, everybody's like you said, going to your point about lawyers being mercenaries, you know, when you have tech giants really making their money off of patents and things and technicalities, because all of the markets are locked up. And again, this is where I don't mind having a political sports conversation in terms of like
that's competition.
Exactly, it's competition. And then when I see 30 million, hold on, 30 million over 30 years from what 30 teams.
Yes.
This is a
30 million over a decade.
I'm sorry.
300 million over a decade, which gets you to 30 million a year,
which is trash. Because when you talk about, I would have to see, and this is where we have to get sophisticated with our question. Like, okay, how many organizations is that going to? How many places is this going to? And like you said, the salaries of the organizations. Because if you're sending it to an institution, that institution divvies up that money after you're maybe taking maybe a $5 million, you sending them $5 million as part of a whole, and then they taking that $5 million and chopping it up. So when people start asking questions about,
how many white families are being fed off of Black family suffering? That's what you're basically asking.
Yeah.
How many nonprofits is going to eat off the NBA acting like they care about Black people?
Because you still also, into your point about making that money on the back end, because it doesn't fix the environments that we come from, and it creates that pros or bust mentality in a lot of our Black boys, especially.
Yeah. Pros or what? You got
pros or bust. And what I mean by pros or bust, a lot of people in the quote unquote hood or that live in inner cities where I grew up, I'll say, a lot of people want to make it to the pros. And so what happens is I've seen and have friends who make it and play up into their like 28, 27 in terms of like semi-pro or chasing that because that is their way out. But what happens is when you understand the mechanics of being in that level of competition in terms of jockeying for a spot there, you're not understanding that one, you're divesting from your social capital, because 9 times out of 10 you aren't really talking to people, as you have to train you mentally to be there. You are dependent on people because you also usually, if you're trying to get to the pros, you can't work as much, so you're losing out economically. And there's so many things that go into that, and is ingrained in a lot of young Black boys. Yeah. And I think for me, that is a problem. I never had that. Like, people thought or asked me like, oh, when I stopped playing in Norfolk State, they were like, oh, like, you crazy, like, you want, it's like, that was never my dream. My dream has always to been, well, first it was being an attorney, but then it's always been surrounded around being a politician or being in politics in some type of way. And that's always been my angle. But what I realized in being around and being in those spaces is most people without the sport, they don't have any existence.
That's not sports.
What's that?
That's coping. You're not. That's escapism.
I agree.
That's not sports.
I agree. And that's the dangerousness of it.
And that's what we got to get into. We're not talking about over privatization. We're talking about escapism. We're not even talking about people who are tapped into reality. Because if you tap into reality, do we have? Let's just see if we got anything over there that's worth commenting on. Because I'm gonna go in.
Not really.
Okay, I'm about to go in. To your point, that's escapism. We have hood movies about that. We got old movies about that. We got Fresh. We got Paid in Full. These things have been expressed. We got New Jack City. We done seen the whole Coke dream and everything else play out. We done seen these things, right? What I'm hearing now is that, because I've been had grown ass women come to me and tell me, boy, I beat you because you don't want to play sports.
Yeah.
I've been called big for nothing.
Big for nothing.
And you big for nothing. And that's when I get on here, it's like, I'm not helping niggas no more. I'm not helping you. Fuck you. Straight up and down, left and right. No. After everything I've been told and said, to your point, that's escapism. That's escapism. That's escapism. That's not accepting what Brian Gumble talks about. You can't be educated outside of racism. You can't buy your way outside of racism. Because it's an imaginary thing. It's a bias. Mm-hmm. You can't convince somebody that won't love you to love you. You can only acknowledge that they won't love you, and that's why you get together with other people and go like, you don't love us, so I can't expect your love to be the thing that keeps me in this community. I need some policy. I need some policing. I need something written on paper so that I can make you accountable. And I'm going back onto my old Negro spiritual shit, Lord. Slaves sue for their freedom. If a slave can sue for their freedom, then your ass can learn what it means that $300 million over 10 years, and that's going to Jordan brand with the
I'm about to get
the $100 million. But what I'm getting to, my whole point is that the energy I'm coming with, because I'll segue this to you. I don't know if you've seen it, but The Last Dance. Mm-hmm. You seen it?
Yes.
Okay. So Jordan even got into tears when he was talking about how people perceive him and how he pushed people to championships. And that's how I feel a lot when we start getting on my soapbox. It's like, if you want to be great, and if you want to take on that moniker of greatness that it means to be a Black American, to not even just sacrifice, it's like to be a Black American and to say that I am the promise of America, that if you enfranchise me as a Black American, you overturn all the centuries of labor exploitation, of housing discrimination. You correct the economy by no longer making me the anchor that keeps us in this deficient cycle. If you want to take that on in Jordan's Last Dance, you gotta be willing to, you gotta have a fucker like me in your face telling you, turn it off.
And I'm gonna let you get into Jordan's Last Dance, but I'm gonna interrupt you with the article so we can segue into it. And this is Michael Jordan and Jordan Brand announced donations. Set of donations, man. Mm-hmm. To the NAACP, LDF, FICPFM, and Black Voters Matter. Last month, Michael Jordan and Jordan Brand committed to donating $100 million over 10 years to directly impact the fight against systemic racism. Now the brand has announced that the donations will be focused in 3 priority areas: social justice, economic justice, and education and awareness, according to the recent press release. I'm all in with Jordan Brand, the Jordan family, and our partners who share a commitment to address a historical inequality that continues to plague Black communities in the U.S., says NBA legend Michael Jordan. And now just skip down. The initial partners were selected based on their ability to create an impact now. The first phase of donations includes 1 million each to the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund Incorporated and the formerly incarcerated and convicted people and families movement, plus 500K to Black Voters Matter to support reformative practices that drive real change in the Black community.
Okay, boom. Because this is where I feel like your voice is more powerful than mine in this space. But I would like to juxtapose Michael Jordan and the Jordan brand entering the philanthropic space of the Black community via that very targeted language versus Jay-Z's Rock Nation entering it through a partnership and not necessarily a philanthropic or an ongoing business practice. And how does that set into your frame of reference? How does it make you feel that you have Jordan that's focused on social justice and you have Kyrie Irving focused on social justice and so forth? How does all of that resonate with you?
Too late.
Too late?
Too late.
Too late for who?
Yeah, too late. Too late. As far as Jordan, he had a whole career's worth of time to do a lot of these things that he's decided to do. It just seems convenient to me that you have a man who created shoes that we've seen with our own two eyes, people rob, steal, and kill for, and you say nothing.
But how? Okay. To that point, in the Last Dance, Barack Obama also addressed when you have an affluent influencer or affluent persona that there's this expectation of Black Americans with affluence to speak on politically. But Jordan did not create Nike, nor was he Tinker Hatfield who designed the shoe. But if we're going to hold Jordan accountable, how come we don't hold Spike Lee, who was the campaign and marketer, to that same standard in which Spike Lee
or Nike?
I don't give a damn. I don't hold corporations to moral standards.
I agree.
Corporations are the absolute. So this is why I don't care about corporations, but I will work for one. Anyway, this is why I don't care about corporations. Is that the corporations allow themselves to become persons through the 13th Amendment. So the very subversive amendment in which we're still imprisoned by because of the exception that allows them to act as persons within the corpus of law. Therefore, we are natural persons and persons, and this is where language becomes important. But even going back to the visual language, we associate Jordan with a visual language, like those Yeezys. There's a visual language. Fashion is a visual language. Spike Lee is a filmmaker. Why isn't Spike Lee held to the same standard that we're holding Jordan? Because I feel that it is not his responsibility to put money anywhere. And here's why I say that. Look at Bill Gates. He got way more money than Jordan will ever have. When did Bill Gates start giving back? When did Bill Gates and Melinda Gates start their foundation? After they didn't have billions of dollars. So we hold our quote unquote Black leaders to a standard. To me, that's impossible.
I don't think it's impossible per se, and I'll say that
my too late.
Not necessarily. I don't think it's ever too late, and that's where mine is more of a concurrent argument. I don't think it's too late, but I think what to his point is that it's disingenuous. It's not necessarily that it's too late. I don't know. I can't tell right now, but what I will say is I will say that the problem with it being disingenuous is the same problem that I have with any operator being disingenuous, because it puts my group, unfortunately, doesn't necessarily have the sophistication. So people use it to commodify, basically, like donating is making money in a lot of ways in terms of it's allowing not even the taxes. It allows you to gain access to the social capital and it helps you build your nerve, right? But the thing is, I think that people should understand that you're better served as a leader in that way is, a lot of people talk about Muhammad Ali. And I think what Muhammad Ali did very well was that, one, he understood his lane. He liked what Malcolm X and the nation and all of those political leaders were talking about, but he never overspoke them because he allowed them to be the experts on political direction. But what he did was he used his voice. I never saw him, and again, I'm not saying he didn't help people, because when you have that money, you are helping people. So I can say that in a lot of cases, these people who are in the NFL, NBA are helping their bases. And that for me that's a lot, because a lot of people don't necessarily understand the strain that it comes with to uphold a community and for people to see you as that. And it influences those decisions in some ways, because some can make the argument that I'm going to take that next deal because I know I got this, and this mouth to feed. So the whole collective gets angry at me. But look, like you said, in some cases, I've had to make the decision like, I'm going to feed my son. I disagree with certain things, but it comes down to, is this a hill I'm willing to die on? What I will say about Jordan and the whole Jordan brand, I love Michael Jordan's, and we can have another conversation about the symbolism behind that. Is I think it was very entrenched in our culture, and also it's something that provided a certain level of hope in how we consume, and it's something that I've even had to conflict with in myself, being fully transparent and understanding that the material is not the value. Though I like Jordans, again, going back to the full argument around engaging something in a very superficial way, I had to understand that it is just that. It is just a visual. It is just something that I can use in a particular way, but don't put so much onus on it or so much onus on people. And the reason that I will like somewhat agree in terms of people being held up to this impossible standard is because it would be different if the same people who complained about Jordan not doing what he did come into his back and back when people make the stances. Because again, it's hard to hear you say that when we have a Colin Kaepernick who's a modern person who took those stances, when we have people in our contemporary time who take those stances, and people don't do anything, because we're having a whole conversation now about how people, again, we have all of this going on politically and all of these things going on economically, and you want Michael Jordan to speak on that, and which I understand why you do because of the clout and the social capital that he has, but understand that when he makes that statement and people don't come behind them to undergird, like you said earlier, when I don't have something to fall back into, it becomes a hard ask. And I get it because I've been on both sides of the spectrum, and it's like, all right, cool, people want me to do this, and which is why I tell my friends all the time, okay, you want me to take these stances. What are you going to do when I take these stances? Because you can't ask me to take food out of my girl's mouth as well as my son's mouth. And at the same time, when something happens, imagine if I can hear it now. Imagine if Michael Jordan had took one of those stances, right? We would have had people calling him uppity radical Negroes. Because let's not forget how they treated King. Let's not forget. And I think that's where I remain objective on that point in peace, because my critique of it, I don't have the public doing what I need them to do to be able to critique really Michael Jordan or anybody in that space, because it becomes hard. Because I am also begging people to help.
Something got good.
And I mean, and I agree. So, like, what I hear, and this is also what I've run into too, and I'm just gonna be wholly honest. Like, there's a class of people, because there's a large gap in between what, and now let me break it up generationally. What the silent generation did as far as building upon. And then once you get from the silent generation to boomers and then Gen X, there's a big drop off as far as what they were willing to do for community. Case in point, there was an article you shared on Facebook talking about what was attributed to the boomers But in reality, that was the silent generation that built a lot of those things that are attributed to. Exactly. What happened is that
like the Great Deal and everything else.
Really, the boomers were a part of the 80s and 90s. And let's be fully honest, they did not grab hold onto the community and what needed to be done in order to cultivate a lot of the things that we're talking about. So what happens is that you have a generation of people, all they know is the entertainment, because a lot of the professional boomers from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s decided they was just gonna take that shit and run.
So let me ask you this, and now, because I want to hear how you feel about, because again, I just laid it out in terms of, and I laid it out that way because we have this dichotomy, this wild conundrum that we're in as a community. Because I hear what you're saying about the boomers, and I want everybody to be clear on this. I'm not a boomer apologist, but one thing I can say about boomers and some of the older Gen Xers, and I want to say this because it goes back to sacrifice.
Yeah.
And picking a stance and sticking to it. What I will say is boomers, I would agree with you that they got it wrong in a lot of ways. But what I can also say is that they chose and they stuck to it and they moved on it. What I see a lot in our generation is, yes, we want to critique boomers, which I feel as though is fair, but we don't have systems. We don't have a new standard, and everybody just does this thing where it is about, well, I'm going to do what I want to do. And even when you juxtapose it in that era, it's like, all right, they did leave it, right? So they economically moved to like suburbs. Again, I get you, they've shunned people, but I want to hear.
And who takes up all of that responsibility? Because there's still responsibility to be had.
So, but they're in their 60s now. Yeah, I gotta jump in here, bro. They're in their 60s. I'm booming.
Not all of them. Not all of them.
I don't give a damn. No, I'm so serious. No, you don't. You don't. And here's why. It takes years to build where you can emotionally tolerate the stresses we're talking about. You can't learn how to be an athlete overnight. The same way you can't learn how to be a CEO overnight. Everybody wants to be a CEO / this / this / this. It's like, what are you committed to? What are you specializing in? What is your subject matter expertise? I have had boomers. I'm boomer hooked. That's the only reason we can do this. I'm boomer hooked. Wait a minute. I have boomers that are not just Black Americans, who are not just upset with millennials, because millennials don't get how you have to structure your life to have a career. Because people are not committing at all. And it's like they're not committing. And it's like you have to commit, even no matter what idea it is. And this sounds horrible, but no matter what idea it is, if you do not commit to it, you cannot enrich it, you cannot nourish it. That goes back to the vices, though. But people are committed to the vices. They're committed to the vices. People are committed to the tomfoolery. People, you know why Donald Trump wins? Because he knows people want salacious headlines. He knows as a president, it's like, this is frivolous.
Oh, yeah.
Why would I even talk to people seriously? It's like Scoopy-Dee-Poo.
That's why that was a great troll. But go ahead.
And I mean, for me, and I get all of what you're saying, but where do you learn that from?
You have to
learn. Hold on. What do you learn? What?
Where did people learn that whole mindset from? Because people just don't wake up one day. As far as like, okay, so you have the boomers, right? Who committed to what you said they committed to. But now there comes different generations. Where do those generations go to learn?
From those generations.
Boomers.
But that's the thing. And that's the acknowledgement that we have to come into, which is why I'm saying the prioritization, right? This is why we're having this conversation. I agree with you in the sense that you ask, where do you get that from? But when you, again, you make a decision to say, let me assess the situation and not focus on sports in a trivial manner,
Yes.
you then see that, okay, I can't, like, for example, in my career, there's certain people I know I can't go to. There's certain things I'm here right now doing because I know I have to do it on my own.
Yes.
My mom can't support me in a myriad of ways. And again, that's because she does what she does. And because I have assessed the situation and I have an understanding of where I stand within a whole collective, I know that I have to, again, be the one to take on hits. We had that conversation around taking hits. You have to take those hits. Why? Because you don't have an elder community who is in agreement with whatever stance you choose. So you have to understand that, like, I don't have anybody to go to. We don't have anybody to go to. When you do find those individual people, fine, take on to that, but understand collectively, we don't really have that as a group, and that's why we're trying to have these conversations.
Exactly.
While we're having this conversation, if you watching, man, like the video, share the video, drop a comment, man, because we trying to really move our group. We are over time, but we trying to move the group into a space where, again, I'm not elitist in any way. You know for a fact, I'm probably the most niggerish nigga ever. I just, again, understand how to navigate certain environments and certain spaces, and I know how to commit. Because a lot of people, again, even when you talk about the boomers and stuff like that, there are people, again, who don't agree with my stances, but they love me and they give me opportunities because I'm committed, because they know I'm going to be present, because they know I'm going to come, and they know I'm going to go hard at whoever for what I stand for. There's a difference between being liked and respected, and that's what our generation is going to have to get to understand. I don't want boomers to like me. Just respect me to throw me over the fence so I can fight the fight that I want to fight for our specific group and generations after, because we're going to have to pivot from where they were headed. And they understand that because they understand that they, I wouldn't even say dropped the ball, but they chose a path that didn't yield the result that they thought. Yeah. And I'll give them that because no human being has foresight.
Exactly.
But what I'm asking for us to do is choose. I just, on Twitter, I was talking about it earlier. Like, a lot of people don't want to choose. And you can't have this overly fluid environment because there aren't any rules of engagement. And I'm not trying to be elitist. I'm really just trying to get people to understand that the things that you say you want, you are going to have to sacrifice for them. There are so many things that I do that I hate. There's so many things that I read that I hate. There's so many people that I talk to that I do not like. But guess what? Because I have to feed my family and because I want to enrich you, and all of the people that y'all know, I want to talk to those people. I just called you the other day, right? Because I wanted to give up.
Yep.
Because, and that's why I do it. Because again, I can't build anybody on a faulty foundation. I gotta stand firm where I'm at, and I'll have a conversation with any single body on where they stand at, and we can meet in the middle. I'm not extremist in that way. As long as, again, what I want the group to understand is that as long as your values aren't detrimental to the overall collective, do you, sweetheart, do you, boo-boo. Be responsible, though. Because understand that irresponsibleness has a ripple. Because when I'm being irresponsible, that irresponsibleness means that that's one less person that has access to an institution that comes from the inner city. That means that I can't necessarily put people in position, even if they wanted to be in a position. That's a sacrifice. I don't want to wear suits sometimes. I don't want to do and talk to people. Have to get out of that. And I don't want to necessarily stay on this topic because, like you said, we over time, but I wanted to move to, and this is more of like just another trivial conversation. I'm going to bring it up on the screen real quick. And I just wanted to get y'all opinion on it. It's something that I seen before I had just came in. And this is in regards to, back to sports. Deion Sanders made some comments on social media. He said all players opting out in all sports, all caps, please believe the game will go on without you. This is the business. And don't you ever forget that. There's no one that's bigger than the game itself. Only the ref, umps, and officials are that important that you can't play without them. Not you. Hashtag truth. And so I'll come back. I'll go to you, Quan, and then we can just bring it all the way back around. And y'all drop some comments again and about that. Tell me how you feel about it. And when I get back to me, I'll read off a comment before we close out and juxtapose my stance on it. As I'm kind of, I haven't really digested it yet, but go ahead, Quan.
As far as that statement goes, it just shows like how pretty much the institution of sports goes on. And I mean, for me, I feel like that's a metaphor for every institution. It's a metaphor for every institution. The people don't matter. The institution feeds itself. It'll replace you as soon as it can and as soon as it wants to.
Mm-hmm. Yes. But the institution's whole purpose is to serve an emotion. This is entertainment. I don't know what it is about this penchant to absolve people of their humanity, but humanity isn't always nice. Let's understand what Deion Sanders is saying to you. You don't matter. Understand you don't matter. He's right. It is the truth. But institutions' whole purpose of existing, because this is John Paul Sartre, an existentialist, a French existentialist who talks about institutions. And when I use hell as the other people, I'm making fun of a joke that he has. No Way Out is the name of the movie with Sidney Poitier. No Exit is the play I was really referring to. Institutions feed people. Viacom exists so that you are entertained. Columbia Records exists because people want to listen to music. It's not enough to say, oh, these institutions are evil, and not to look at yourself and go like, but how do I feed into their depravity? Institutions, buildings do not exist on their own. Buildings exist to inhabit people who share an idea, going back to the values. So when Deion Sanders say this, it's exactly what we're saying. You're not a politician. You are a player. Understand, there is a manager over you. There are assistant coaches over you. There are head coaches over you. You can get fired. You can get fined. These players, Kanye even came out and told you, they do not own anything until you understand that you do not own the infrastructure of telecommunications. You do not own satellites. Therefore, you cannot broadcast any message you want to. You will not understand Peter Finch in The Network, a 1970s movie, and more importantly, you'll argue with Deion Sanders instead of elevating Deion Sanders and asking him, okay, since you outside of the game, you've played the game, what is it about contracts that doesn't allow players to have these discussions? Because now he don't have to worry about the NFL. He can weaponize his knowledge against the NFL and consult on better things. 2 Chainz even talk about this in an NAACP track when he told him he has his first offense. It's not like it's not in the community. It's not like it's not in the air. People don't want to be receptive. And then when they ass get in trouble, I'm going to say it. When they ass get in trouble and people say a hard head make a saw fast, and people get tired of allocating their resources to your nonsense, you get upset. Oh, you bougie. You damn right. I'd rather sip this wine and have my fun than keep bailing you out because you're chasing a dream. And I'm not talking about people who go in the PSJ, public safety justice system. I'm talking about people who get in bad relationships with people that they know that they can't build long-term relationships with. I'm talking about people who start families that they know that they're not emotionally ready for. I'm talking about a whole slew of behaviors that we go, oh, we're not going to judge you judging. But the moment somebody holds you to a standard, oh, you bougie, we gonna ostracize that person. But then when you get in trouble, oh, you ain't come to help me. You can't have it both ways.
That what we got? Damn prime time. And I second what Daquan said about Sanders as far as that was Zemba G. Just to wrap, we also have to have that with people who choose to go into these institutions knowing that it's get down or lay down. So if you know this is how they operate, and you know that all of these things are going to be weaponized against your community, you know exactly what's going on and how they're using you as the tool, but yet you are still participating in it without.
Yes. Here's why I'm going to do that.
Without then going back and relaying the message that, hey, this is how I'm being used by these people, because it's all.
It's not.
But go ahead.
What you're talking about is whistleblowers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many whistleblowers in America have blown the whistle and have gotten no protections. You're talking about martyrdom. You don't want to be the martyr because you want to benefit. You want to cross the River Jordan. You want to be behind Moses. You want to bow to the golden calf. You need to be slain because you are not allowed to tell me that I can't go where effort is, stay where effort is not. You're talking about a wasteland. You're talking about a catacomb. You're talking about a necropolis. You're talking about dead people. Here's my point. Institutions, and I'm talking about the philosophical. An institution is a gathering of people for the cooperation of a value. So no matter what you do, if the street is an institution and the NFL is an institution, if I'm going to people who are telling me that I'm not going to move unless you do this, and I have seen for decades that these people have not moved or supported people who have moved, you're asking me to die and lay on a verbal and symbolic sword so that you can get a little bit of policy written in my blood so I can move forward. What I'm talking about is Malcolm X. What I'm talking about is Martin Luther King. What I'm talking about is Robert Kennedy, the Civil Rights Movement. What I'm talking about is the Civil War. How many times do Black leaders and Black martyrs, Black women and Black men who show that they care for the Black community have to die on a sword before the community places the values and the institutions that they want to build? We have a Black Wall Street now. We have one. We have Black enterprise. We have Black business. Why is Abilene forced into foreclosure? But people are still watching Viacom. I am sick of the argument of martyrdom. If you're not going to put in the effort, you can't shame me for going where the life is.
But here's my, not to counter that, but to just add on. We have to get out of I. No, I feel like it has to be a us.
No, there is no us. You counter it, but you're trying to go back into saying I'm individual. What I just said is that I have surveyed the terrain. Mm-hmm. I have walked the path. Mm-hmm. There is, and again, community. You are an individual. Your palate is not my palate. Your taste is not my taste. I would literally kill you if I expected from your body what my body is capable of. You want an equality of outcomes. If you cannot bear the load that you're asking for, then it would kill you. What we're talking about is gaining responsibility. We're not talking about power for power's sake. We are arguing for self-determination and autonomy so that we can have Frederick Douglass argue for it. Martin Luther King argued for it. The autonomy, if you want the autonomy, you have to take on the responsibility. But in taking on the responsibility, you still have to have the discipline. Because if you want to be honest, the true white supremacists will do what Dave Chappelle showed. That's giving them money because you don't have the institutions, you don't have the discipline to build your own institutions to forego the long term. The family itself is an informal institution. You can't forego institutions. Yeah, what I mean by informal, but it's formal. But when my point is that this us and we, it's like it's interdependent. There is no us, there is no we, there is an I, there is a we, there is a me. It's all those things. And if you have a person that's sitting on their ass and judging me because I don't want to sit on my ass, I'm trying to scramble any way I can scramble, and then I get on the other side, they tell me, I'm going to stop here because I'm going to die trying. I'm not Lot's wife. If I go to the Lord tells me, if you can get 50 people to come, I got you, my dude. We're going to save Sodom and Gomorrah. I want to try to get 50 people, and I'm like, all right, God, I couldn't get 50 people. How about 40? And the Lord knows you ain't getting 40, so he gives you 40. You keep going back, and the Lord goes like, you know what, Slim? I didn't give you how many tries to save those people, how many times it's going to take for you, Lot, to see that they don't want what you want. So take your kids, take your wife, and tell them, if they look back, they're going to turn into a pillar of salt. So I take my kids, I take my wife. My wife looks back. She turns into a pillar of salt. Do I now abandon my kids because my wife decided she liked what she liked? No. She liked what she liked. She made her choice. People like to throw the Bible at me. Now throw the Bible at me again. Because even Jesus' disciples betrayed him. Come on now.
So I'm gonna finish out like this, man. In the case of Deion Sanders, and again, it was something I saw today. Because I hear both sides, and more so the side of, like you said, people understand that we don't necessarily have the acumen, the attention span to go the longevity route. And it goes back to everything that we're talking about. Because again, this whole conversation is about sacrificing. It's about getting off the vice. It's about prioritizing. Because what he's talking about is truth. It is, you can't dispute it. Because we all know that we're disposable in that way, which is why we navigate a lot of the spaces in the way that we do, because of this harsh reality. So I think anybody who is debating him in that way is problematic. Like, I agree with you in terms of, I'm more about, I want to get to the weeds and ask you how and why do you feel that way? And like you said, what are the ways that we can prevent ourselves from being used in that way? Because what we have to do is we have to make the assessments. Deion Sanders made an assessment, a correct assessment, an assessment that everybody knows to be true, but still has this cognitive dissonance about how we're going to engage it, which is why we had this conversation about sports in the Black community, because he's making this statement about people not mattering, but people are still going to support it in every which way, form, or fashion.
Oh my God.
And not even, like you said, take away the things that can strengthen our community. So like you said, the contractual agreements or all of the inner workings like that. I think that's where, again, I have my issue. I think there's a certain level of leniency that you have, Quan, as well as a lot of other people, which is why I honestly don't think that, because it's a thing. I used to have a conversation with my mother. My sisters and brothers are completely different from me in terms of, acumen and so on and so forth, but I was always sought to be the person who supposed to lead people, right? And what I told my mother is, you're an enabler. You can't allow people to do something for so long and then get mad. Because again, I would tell my mother, son, don't call my phone with this shit. Please don't. I don't care. Because you're going to have this conversation with me. You're going to go back and allow them, my brothers and sisters, to do the same thing. So I don't care. And I think that's where you're getting to in terms of, like, people want people to be these martyrs. Like I was saying earlier, people want a spokesperson. He could potentially be a spokesperson because he just said it. He just dropped a bomb. He could. I'm surprised he's not catching flack from both sides in terms of revealing something of that nature. But again, that's where white supremacy is brilliant in a lot of ways. It's not going to go off on that because it will bring attention to it. So again, and this is where our sophistication has to rise, because a lot of it is through omission. So I'm not going to recognize what he just said. we're gonna keep this ball rolling, and we're gonna keep this thing. We're gonna have these games, and they're gonna be again disposable every single day of the week. And so, in the end, I would just ask everybody, what vices are you willing to sacrifice? Write those down. What's your goals? Map all of those things out in terms of your individual side as well as your communal side, as those things will be very different. Like me, I challenge myself to be more social all of the time because I don't necessarily like engaging with people because I do it as a job all day, every day. But I challenge myself to do that as I know being social is part of community building, and I have to do that. And even having these conversations and even being more understanding, as I'm a person who I'm gonna drop the hand on you, man. I don't really care about all of the allowing people to do that because I've had to do it. I've had to make the adjustments despite whether I want. The only reason I can wear my hair like this now is because I've done everything I was asked. And I mean, until another opportunity comes up and I have to make a pivot, then I'll assess it, I'll reassess it then. But everybody who's here, man, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us again on another conversation. We really do appreciate y'all. We really do appreciate the people who come out, especially on a Saturday when you could be doing anything, chilling with your family, to come listen, hear us talk, help us black men shift the narrative for ourselves, because that's part of this exercise. Is that I'm tired of hearing about the trash black men. Like, it's good. We out here and we ready to rock. And I got my guys Q, I got Quan, and we are here to have these conversations, man. So like the video, share, comment. Again, we're gonna have much more coming in the future. We building the ship while we building the ship while we sailing. So bear with us. And again, this is about giving back. So always feel free to check out our social media, whether it be Twitter at Gilded Sages, whether it be our IG at The Gilded Sages, as well as check out, everything that we're doing. So again, much love to you all. Peace to you all. Oh no, again, check out Death of a Nigga Boy too. We need more eyes on that. We're gonna have a conversation about that eventually. That was a book that I released last year. But that was kind of the building point of all of this. So definitely cop that. You can get it at Politics and Prose or the Apple Store, and that's nigger with ER, not A. And so enjoy. Be safe, and thank you again. Much love, man. And we'll see y'all again.
Peace.